you purpose. I've been waiting.
Their final moments approach. Their final moments approach.
Mundo's pain always at zero. Our duel begins.
Wait, I tweeted something. I went to West Coast Customs yesterday and met a wonderful girl named Sophia. She has lupus, lives with her family, and is currently learning mechanical work to restore the old Honda Civic she cherished for years. Helping others has always been the dream I've had as a streamer, and I just want to say thank you for giving me the chance to do this.
Shut the fuck up.
Dude, good post, me. True. How's it cringe? I actually wrote this out, by the way, for him to post. I saw he posted it. I'm like, bro, just put, if you want me to actually say how I feel, then I'll just do it. No, chat, it's an amazing feeling. Being able to say, hey, like, I'll help you with your car or whatever, and it's a life-changing thing for him. It's truly amazing. I love what I do, and I'm very appreciative of you guys. So, thank you. Giggles was great. We can help her out. She messaged me yesterday, actually. I'll tell you what she said. She said...
Shut the fuck up.
She said, shut the fuck up. She said, hello, Ms. Kiff. Thank you so much for everything today. Blessings. And I said, hey, you don't have to thank me. And she said... all thanks. Have a wonderful night again. Thank you for making today super duper special. You made my day. Look at that, chat. Someone's day we did not make.
Shut the fuck up.
Is Julia. Oh my god. Has she been mad at me? She is so... she's like, why the fuck could you just not make the tattoo say JK with the heart? I fucked up so bad. She's not happy. She does not want to talk to me that much. And we have a day with her Monopoly today, so... she's not happy. At all. She's getting it removed, apparently. Because she's like, it's so ugly. I think it's cute, but she said apparently she hates her chat for telling me to do Oklahoma. Which is not... that's, again, not my fault. I don't think it's my fault at all that I picked Oklahoma, by the way. Because, let's be honest, it was... I didn't know. You guys told me to do it, and I thought it was cute. I thought it was cute, but she hates it so much she's getting it removed. I'm not removing my chompy one. I can care less. Even if it had some stupid shit. What's this?
Shut the fuck up.
I'm dumb, and I thought that I would be doing nothing today. And Julia had this great idea where she said,
Fuck the
Mace,
shut
we
up.
should get matching tattoos.
I can surprise him with the tattoo that he's really, really, really
So do
want.
gay.
I kind of want to bother her. So I was thinking we get O and O, because she's never had a match.
If I really wanted to do something that would surprise him and he would be happy with, I was thinking about getting him a Chompy tattoo.
Julia pussy.
Property of Mizkif.
I think Chompy would still be so cute. We had a little. I think it would be something that would actually mean a lot to me.
Biggie Money's lip baby.
She said that?
I could ruin his life.
She said this? By Mizkif. It's like when Woody looks at his shoe. Oh, I should get her to put that on her foot.
Make
Chompy
Chompy
and
sit in the
Dito.
avocado.
Which one do you guys think?
Play with me.
Jobs are not what they used to be. The average time an employee spends with their company is now at the lowest level ever.
Do not hesitate.
Jobs are not what they used to be. The average time an employee spends with their company is now at the lowest level ever, and that's by design. We have gone from full-time to part-time to casual to gig work, lowering the expectation of a long-term professional.
It's crazy how many people do like Uber and they do Uber Eats or Lyft or some sort of thing like this. It's actually crazy how popular it is.
Relationship every step of the way. If this
DoorDash,
didn't do
yeah.
enough, studies have shown that many workplaces are now intentionally promoting the fear of job losses in an attempt to motivate workers and keep costs down.
That's smart. That's a good idea. Yeah, you got to make them think that they're on the ropes.
This is usually a really dumb idea. The death of job security is bad for workers and bad for companies, but nobody cares anymore.
So we have immediately seen, Andrew, layoffs.
Yep.
We have seen price increases, so that's inflation. Teachers and staff at schools.
Well, it's also like, I mean, if they're paying more money, like the, what do you call it? Like the amount of money that like jobs are paying, like minimum wage goes up, they're going to be able to get better candidates, just in general. Like the more money you pay for a job, the better candidates you're going to get. Just on average. Not, it's not a 1-to-1, but there's this fucking extremely strong correlation.
coast to coast could soon be out of the job.
15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record.
Mr. Musk said the company would look to reduce headcount by around 10%.
Layoffs are already piling up this year, and we're just a few weeks into 2024.
Up until the 1980s, it wasn't unusual for workers to spend their entire professional careers working with just one company. Company loyalty was highly valued by both employers and employees, and the threat of getting laid off or fired was incredibly low. If you ever watch old films and see someone getting fired as a major plot point, just remember it actually was a big deal back then.
What was this one? The car salesman movie, Alec Baldwin. Oh, fuck. Not Never Give an Inch. That's something else. Glengarry Glen Ross? I remember seeing this, bro. This guy, like, Alec Baldwin, huge fucking asshole, great fucking actor. He was so good with this. Coffees for closers, that's right. So good.
But according to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, those days are long gone. The average tenure of young employees these days is less than a third of the baby boomers exiting the workforce.
I think a lot of people also, this is encouraged by now that people are able to communicate more online. There is a very, very common assumption that, you know, whether it's true or not is irrelevant. People think this, that the best way to increase your salary is to, instead of increasing your rank at your current job, is to hop between company to company and then get your salary up that way instead.
I don't want to sound too old here, but back in my day, people actually cared about losing their job. But today, getting fired or laid off from your company just makes good content to post on TikTok. This is a bad trend.
I don't agree with this. I think that's not true. I think the only reason he's saying that is because he's not looking at the single moms that get fired who lose their house. Like, go out there to the side of the street and talk to all those people and think about how easy was it for them to get laid off of their job. Yeah, for sure, some 19-year-old pretty girl isn't going to have this problem because, you know, she can find a guy to live with or she can go back and live with her parents. But for, like, an average person, getting fired from your job is absolutely fucking life-changing. It's not even a question.
Companies, because it takes away their biggest stick. The fear of getting fired is always going to be a motivator in the workplace. There really is no way around that. If you don't do your job or cause too much trouble for the company, you are going to lose your job.
Well, that's the way it should be. If you're not doing your job, you should get fired. Yeah, wow, what a fucking surprise. We're going to act like this is bad? Yeah, no shit.
But the pay and benefits that come with it. But as the great Peter Gibbons would say, that will only make someone work just hard enough to not get fired. The death of job security means that people just expect to lose their job at some point in their career these days. But there are 3 big reasons why it was allowed to get this bad, and 3 reasons why nobody really cares anymore. The first reason is that companies give up on training their own staff. There is an old joke about company staffing that goes something like this. The CEO and head of HR are arguing about the cost to train staff. The CEO asks, what would happen if we spent all this money and they quit? To which the head of HR responds, what happens if we don't spend the money and they stay? But as more people move jobs more often, the CEO's argument is actually starting to make sense. Research conducted by Peter Capelli, the director of the Wharton School's Center for Human Resources, found that the time and money spent on staff training within companies has fallen drastically. In 1979, the average worker received 2.5 weeks on the job training every single year.
It's also, if you keep rotating employees regularly for easy jobs that don't require a lot of like intuitive thinking or critical thinking, you're able to keep salaries lower because, you know, like a lot of the times whenever people get cut from jobs, like there's actually even laws against this where like you can't just cut people because their salary has gotten too high. Well, think about why there's laws against it. Well, there's laws against it because that's what people try to do.
2004, it was just 11 hours, and most of that was safety training, not developing new skills. A more recent follow-up survey conducted by the same team in 2011 found that only 1/5 of workers received
You can get around those laws easy. Of course you can.
On-the-job training at all within the last year. Companies don't want to train people because they are leaving their jobs more frequently than they used to.
Yeah, sure.
So they are only willing to hire employees that are already able to do the job. Standardized systems have made this a lot easier for them to do. If you are a professional office worker, it's almost a prerequisite to have a basic proficiency in Microsoft Office, especially Excel. And every profession now has its own industry standard productivity programs. If you are a creative, you use Adobe Suite. If you are in sales, you use HubSpot or a comparable CRM. And if you're in marketing, you need to know your way around a box of crayons. Oh, and the advertising analytics backend of Google, Meta, and LinkedIn. Since these skills have become the standard for all employees, companies can hire people that are already ready to work on day one. Where in the past, they would need
why would you want to? Well, it's like, yeah, of course. It's like if you're in a raiding guild, would you want to gear somebody up or just recruit somebody to the guild that's geared? Oh, it's a lot easier to just recruit somebody to the guild that's geared. Like, why would you want to gear up a whole new person? Yeah, want the easier way? Yeah, exactly. It's not even a question.
Lengthy training program on the unique in-house systems of that particular company.
Yeah.
But standardized programs have also meant that people can find a new job that they are qualified for with less barriers, which means they switch jobs more often, which means companies invest less into training unloyal staff, which creates even more need for industry.
It's also because people don't have upward mobility inside of their own jobs. I don't know if he's going to cover this at all, but this is probably, I think, one of the biggest reasons. It's because, like, Blizzard, ironically, is actually one of the companies that at least I'm aware of that doesn't have this problem, where there is a lot of upward mobility, but or at least there used to be. But with a lot of companies, you're kind of like, bracketed in, where you can only go like maybe 3 positions above your current one before you'd have to join another company and then do 3 more and then go back to your original company, and then somehow now you're qualified to do the job that they said that they weren't going to hire you for fucking 5 years ago. 3 is already too much. Sure, I'm just throwing out a number. Same with salary bumps. Yeah, definitely, right? That's the reason why.
Standard systems. The ultimate incarnation of this trend is platform-based gig work.
Yep, there it is.
The professional relationship for this kind of work lasts as long
this
as
is the beginning of this is the beginning of neo-feudalism, by the way, where you have a lot of people whose job it is to only drive around other people with more money than them. This is the beginning. We're seeing it. It's right in front of us. Nobody wants to acknowledge it. It's happening, and it's going to get worse every year. It's just a taxi. It's like, dude, Uber and Lyft is, I would say, 20x or 50x more prevalent and more common than a taxi. Way, way more. And it didn't really have food delivery except for like a couple of places, like pizza places, maybe Chinese. A couple of other places had delivery. Now everything's got it.
App is running, and riders often work between multiple apps at the same time to maximize earning and minimize downtime. If you want to get ahead in a professional career these days, I'm sorry to tell you, but you are going to have to invest some of your own time and money into training yourself, even if it's just to tick a meaningless qualification box.
Yep.
Companies aren't going to train you anymore, which means if you quit or get laid off, it's not as big
My
of a
perspective on this is always lie and cheat on every resume that you possibly can, because the company will do the exact same thing to you given the opportunity. Only don't do that in situations where you can be held criminally liable for not doing it, or in situations where it will be immediately disproven and it can be damaging to you. Other than that, lie about everything and mislead them as much as you can, because they'll do the same thing to you.
A deal for either party. But the decline of on-job training is just the first reason. So it's time to learn how money works, to find out why job security is dying, why nobody cares, and what happens when nobody has a job for long enough to be good at it. This week's lesson is sponsored by Manscaped. Just in time for Father's Day, Manscaped introduces the must-have gifts for every dad. Meet the Handyman and the Weed Whacker 2.0. First up, the Handyman, the face shaver designed for dads.
As a hiring manager, I'll figure out your lies. You're right, but there's places that don't have good hiring managers, and that's what you got to rely on.
Long hair leveler blade,
that's why you go with the shotgun approach.
A close, smooth shave, tackling up to 3 days of growth effortlessly. What makes the Handyman exceptional is its skin-safe technology, significantly reducing the risk of nicks and cuts, and its waterproof design, making it easy to rinse under the faucet. Now onto the Weed Whacker 2.0. This nose and ear trimmer is perfect for dad or companies, even if they were the ones that caused it. The simple fact is that when you get a new job, you aren't going to be very good at what you do until you learn your new role. Standardized systems have made it easier to transfer basic competencies between companies, but even little things like who you talk to about authorizing your expense reports, the names and faces of clients, or how the office printer works, they all take time for new people to learn. According to a study conducted by Gallup, a business analytics company, it takes the average employee 12 months before they reach their full performance potential in their new role.
This is like a whole study done on this about how, like, adding more people to a software project actually makes it take longer. I forgot what the term is for it, but it's a well-known and documented phenomenon.
Studies have suggested that new employees are not fully autonomous in their responsibilities for the first 18 months of their employment.
Is that
new
it?
entrants
I
into the
didn't
job
hear that
market
before.
Are only spending 3 years in their jobs on average. That means they are going to be spending a third of their career just getting up to speed in their new role. That means a loss in productivity for the companies they work for, right? Wrong. Worker productivity is actually at all-time highs.
It is.
So that begs the question, is this in spite of lower job security or because of it? The second reason that job security is...
I think a big reason is also because jobs have been optimized. So a worker can produce more product and more output because their job has been min-maxed more by people whose job it is to min-max jobs and technology. So like there's a lot of reasons why workers are more productive that actually doesn't have anything to do with workers. It's because the people that min-max jobs are getting better at it every year. And technology gets better every year. This is a bullshit take? No, I'm just completely right, and it's obvious. Yeah, there's literally no... If you're arguing against this, you're dumb.
Been dying is that it's a great motivation tool. If the fear of losing your job is only enough to motivate you to do the bare minimum to avoid that tap on the shoulder, then you should know that companies have responded by moving those goalposts. A study conducted by economists at Manchester and Cardiff University looked at the motivating factor of what they called manufactured job uncertainty. In this report, researchers tried to work out why fears of job security was going up, even when the rates of people being fired from full-time positions was stable.
It's the same reason why people that are probably afraid of shark attacks go up during Shark Attack Week. It's because people are talking about layoffs all the time. It's like there's not that many people getting attacked by sharks, but whenever you're reading posts about it every day, you think, holy fuck, man, I better not take a bath. There might be a shark in there. That's the reason. It's the same reason, like, this is going to be a spicy one, okay? It's going to get some people mad. Get ready. It's the same reason for, like, false rape accusations. People think that it happens all the time. Bro, it's like a low single-digit percentage of the ones that are actually found out to be fake. Super, super, super uncommon. Extremely fucking rare.
It's by comparing companies in America and the UK.
But because they're so upsetting and they're so unfair, everybody talks about them. And because everybody's talking about them, you think that they're happening all the time. But they're not. It's the same thing as streaming. Oh, I want to be a streamer so I can be rich. No, there's like 50 streamers that are like that. Nobody else is.
If they insist on a fight,
who are very happy to lay people off to appease
Sharks
shareholders.
are not a reason to not take a
companies in
shower.
Japan,
And
which has a
explain
strong culture
Sharknado.
of never firing people. A small tangent, but Japanese businesses actually take firing people so seriously that they have an alternative practice called oidashibeya.
Is this where they give them shitty jobs? Like,
this loosely translates to workers' purgatory.
Yeah.
According to Japan Intercultural Consulting, a firm that advises businesses operating in the Japanese market, workers' purgatory happens when an employee chronically underperforms in their role. Instead of getting fired, they are typically placed in a room, often windowless, where they have nothing to do.
Yep.
In many cases, their business cards are taken
where's
away.
my stapler?
And they are forced to do menial, mind-numbing tasks or given nothing to do at all.
Yeah, if you clear out the rats
Japanese
down here,
companies
Milton.
would rather put their workers in solitary confinement than
Yeah.
fire them, making them a pretty good contrast to companies in America and the UK. What the economists found was that even when job tenure wasn't actually
Milton
being
treatment?
reduced
Yep.
by layoffs or firings, changes to corporate control and especially company mergers or acquisitions raised uncertainty. Companies noticed that by hyping up this uncertainty and making workers compete against each other to maintain their position in a theoretical downsizing, they could get people to work harder.
Absolutely.
Companies doing this would rank the performance of their teams and compare them
And
to
also,
one
it's good to keep people fighting against each other so they don't think about fighting against you. So, like, if the workers are too busy getting mad and resenting each other, they stop thinking about the fact that you've engineered the situation to happen in the first place.
another. Highlight staff errors and downplay strong performers so that managers and their teams always felt like their job was at risk.
Yeah.
The Japanese firms, despite actually having shorter tenures for managers and operating with more business uncertainty thanks to a weaker overall economy, had a higher sense of job security, mainly thanks to a culture of protecting workers even at the expense of shareholders.
I think that it's very important to keep in mind, somebody in chat brought this up. I would bet, I don't know this, but I would bet that Japan probably has a lot stricter labor laws and you probably can't fire people as easily as you can here in the US. And that probably plays a bigger role than any other cultural reason. But you could also say that those laws are informed by the cultural reasons, so it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario.
In a wonderful twist of fate, though, the study also found that this is not really working on younger employees. Decades of well-publicized layoffs means that younger managers have no expectation of job security and aren't afraid of losing their jobs as much as older managers who come from a time when people could spend their entire careers with one company. The rank and yank strategy only works to boost productivity for so long. A company should get rid of bad employees, but if it makes everybody feel on edge about their jobs forever, then even the best employees are just going to look for better opportunities elsewhere.
I think that the bigger problem is the lack of upward mobility. I think that's the real reason. It's people that are like 28 and they've been at the same job and they feel like they're ready to be promoted, but they can't get promoted because maybe they don't have a, like maybe a master's degree. So they have to join another company that doesn't have that requirement, and then they come back and then they basically get, they are effectively applying to the same job with experience from that job that they're applying from, even though they didn't need that requirement somewhere else. That's the real reason. That's the actual, I think that's a much bigger factor with like employees over like 26 or 28, if I had to guess, from like, conversations I've had with friends and stuff like that.
Younger workers have also realized that changing jobs more frequently, especially early in their career, is the best way to move up the corporate ladder and secure pay increases. I will say it in every video I can, but if you want to increase your earnings in your career, multiple studies suggest that the best way to do this is to change jobs roughly every 2 years, and always be on the lookout for better opportunities. Companies do not value staff loyalty anymore, because they can't. And that's the third reason why job security
It's not because they can't, it's because they don't have to. The companies only valued that in the past because it was the most effective way for them to make money. The companies never actually cared about you. It's just that caring about you was a secondary outcome to them seeking the highest profits possible. Now that that's no longer possible, or it's no longer necessary, then they don't care about you anymore. They only cared about you as a byproduct of a greater goal.
dying. It costs businesses a lot of money to hire new employees, and then more money to pay them while they're getting good at their job. If they are hiring externally for a more senior position, they will also need to pay that new hire more than an internal promotion. So if it makes no sense, then why do companies keep doing this? Well, it's easier. An internal promotion means someone else needs to be promoted to fill that person's position, and someone else needs to be promoted to fill theirs. Now, instead of your company having one employee in a new job, it has 5.
That's a good point.
Hiring managers could do this, or they could just hire an external candidate that already knows the systems and then get back to scrolling Reddit in their office.
Right.
Workers also don't believe in job stability either. Things like employee pension plans and career development are all the responsibility of the worker now. And if they are accepting that responsibility, they also want the freedom that comes with it. Some companies like consulting, legal, and accounting firms have built their entire workforce around limited time employees. Overworked, underpaid graduates will stick it out in entry-level roles because they know it looks good on the resume when they apply for a real job in 2 years.
Which is true, though. The fact is that, like, being and having one of those jobs is absolutely true, that it helps you a lot. It is, and that's the problem. Is that, like, it shouldn't be true, but it is. That's why people take unpaid internships. Absolutely.
Companies can attract high-performing workers by bragging about how secure they are. Even companies that were considered American institutions have fallen apart too many times for people to think that their job is secure. And job security isn't a selling point worth taking a job for.
I don't think that people are viewing job security as an outcome of the companies falling apart or going bankrupt. Like, unless you're Enron, the Lehman Brothers, or, you know, a handful of other places, like a game studio, for example, it's probably not going to happen in this way. That's not the real reason.
People have learned not to care. So, congratulations, corporate America. You kind of played yourself. There's so much more I want to say on this topic, but it wouldn't make for a good YouTube video. For things like that, make sure you're subscribed to my totally free email newsletter Compounded Daily if you want to get articles that can't be made into videos. The bonus 4th reason that job security is dead is this man right here. Go and watch my new video to find out how an unremarkable chemical engineer worked his way up to personally reshape corporate America into what it is today, all while destroying his company in the process.
What a good guy.
To keep on learning how money works.
What a nice dude. How about that? Well, I figured I'd watch this since I haven't talked about this stuff in a while, but I think it's actually a pretty big problem. I think it's happening, obviously, like with gaming. It's a huge thing. What's this here? Whenever I ask for a raise, my boss makes veiled threats saying if you can't keep up with your workload, we'll bring on other people. Well, what you should do, again, like, my perspective is that this is the way I am in a guild or anything like that. I'm always only in it for myself, and the only times that I help other people or go beyond the scope of what I need to do are in cases where it will be eventually advantageous to myself. I am always advocating for myself directly and myself primarily. If I help other people in the process, then that's usually a good thing, and I will try to do that. But I always put myself first, I put my interests first, and I do what's best for me in all circumstances, even if it's at the detriment of the organization. If it's at the detriment of the company, that's too bad. Oh, that's too bad. Because again, I don't care about them. I care about me. That's it. That's what matters. And so it's your company. Well, I'm not. Yeah, this is different, right? I mean, now I have to give a shit, right? Very much more stressful. Like, it was much less stressful whenever I didn't have to give a shit, you know. But whenever now that I'm in a leadership position, now I do have to give a shit. Now I do have to worry about all these little things, and it's like, oh god, there's a lot going on, right? But like back whenever it was just me looking out for me, it was way easier. It absolutely was. So yeah.
.46, Aizen was quick to defeat him. However, when Unohana stepped up with Isane, he left for Sokyoku Hill without even attacking. Is this because he believed he couldn't win against Unohana? Mr. Kubo then states, he didn't think that he couldn't win, it's just that he didn't want to exhaust himself. One of the first characters to really showcase some insight into how strong Aizen may be at this time is actually Ichigo, the main character. After having his theme song literally turned off by Aizen's finger, Ichigo witnesses Aizen decimate Sajin Komamura with a casual release of Hado 90, Kurohitsugi. Ichigo is so visibly in awe of this, that he cannot fathom the reality of how much Aizen's power dwarfs another captain. This same comparison would be conveyed again through the story, when Aizen is described to have the spiritual pressure of 2 captains, and this would actually be needed to not only fuel but subdue the Hogyoku. Though most of us know that captain level is rather vague, the fact he is seen as double that of Sajin Komamura is a pretty good visual representation. It's even stated that to passively wield Kyoku Suigetsu correctly for such a long time and with it activated on so many different enemies, you would need a lot of spiritual energy to do so, with Tokunada being required to turn it off and on to take breaks when using Kyoku Suigetsu the same way that Aizen was shown to do throughout the whole story. Though we're not 100% aware if or how much stronger Aizen is in Karakura Town compared to Sokyoku Hill, we do at least know via Gin's inner monologue that Aizen was able to rally all of the Espada up and get them to act accordingly because he was so intimidating with his spiritual pressure. This would inherently include the likes of Stark, Baragan, Hallibel, Ulquiorra, and Grimjow, who we actually see him soul crush to indicate just how much he is above them. In Karakura Town, he verbatim states that he is not impressed by any of the Espada, to the point that he takes Hallibel out of commission and states that they don't deserve to fight under him. Gin's statement, by the way, is said in past tense, and Aizen implies he had already maxed out his capabilities as a Shinigami, hence needing the Hogyoku to surpass the barrier between Hollow and Shinigami to become transcendent, so we'll assume the gap between these two Aizens is almost as different as before and after having his morning coffee, or just a difference in clothing. Obviously, once the Hogyoku starts to upgrade him, he does become stronger, but we do know when that takes place. However, we have no proof that he trained, and it doesn't seem to be the case that he would have, because he does state that his emphasis was on the Hogyoku, which means that he maxed out his capabilities as a Shinigami, pursued the Hogyoku for further evolution, so on and so forth. It's real streamlined, easy to comprehend. Aizen on Sokyoku Hill is essentially the same Aizen that fights Yamamoto. There really is no way to indicate that he got stronger or weaker. Keep in mind that for someone like Yamamoto to go beyond this barrier, which gets mentioned quite a lot by Aizen, he had to train and fight for around 2,000 years. In Ichigo's case, he was a hybrid fusion being since he was born, so he's an anomaly. If you look at the narrative comparison between Ichigo and Aizen, Ichigo started as a hybrid, and then Aizen becomes one. In Kenpachi's case, he had to awaken his famous strength from the past, and then he gained access to his Shikai and Bankai, which before this he never had, not even in the past. And Ichibei Hyosobe had to go bald. Nah, but seriously, Ichibei and those aforementioned characters had to do some rather particular things to break that barrier or to become transcendent. For some odd reason, I have encountered a few Bleach fans here or there over the years that argue Aizen never actually upgraded the Espada members, and that's just how they always were, which obviously doesn't make sense based on the presentation of how they go from being homeless to being given clothes and a sword. During Baragan's final moments, he makes a statement that Aizen had actually given him power with the Hogyoku. If number 2 and King of Hueco Mundo is getting upgraded, it's pretty obvious where they all got their human forms, Zanpakuto and Resurrections. Even after that, he's still established to be superior to them. Not only do we have the confirmation from Gin where he's monologuing in his head, which means that he's not saying anything that is meant to be taken as, ooh, that could be a lie, because why would he lie in his own head? We then see Aizen casually destroy multiple captains at once, and easily manipulates them all with Kyoka Suigetsu. Even after 100 years of training and mastering their holification, the Vizards are absolutely useless against him. On Sokyoku Hill in the Soul Society arc, Aizen makes a statement that wielding the Kurohitsugi is a little bit unreliable because of the level of Kido that it is. However, there are some complications with this situation, so he didn't use the full incantation when summoning the technique, which means that it could have been more powerful if he took the time to do so, but because he was, under a lot of pressure considering how many enemies were approaching him, he just whipped it out, one-shot Sergeant Komamura, then he made that statement. Now, later on in the story, he makes 2 really interesting points about the technique. For one, now that he's become transcendent, he believes that the potential for how potent it could be can be way more devastating due to his level of spiritual pressure as a transcendent being. Along with that too, he emphasizes that with a full incantation, it also increases the power. Names in Bleach hold power, so it's very clear why it wasn't at full power. I would say that's why a lot of the time the battles in Bleach feel very expressive. They flow through the narrative in this very poetic fashion, where the battling itself is intertwined into the writing. Aizen also does emphasize that he thinks the attack will be special because of his current state of power. It'll be even more unique than a full incantation Kurohitsugi. The dynamic Aizen creates between the Espada and himself is also very fascinating because of how they essentially represent aspects of himself, the aspects of death of his ego. After his death, which was delivered by Ichigo, then almost 2 years of imprisonment, he seems to have completely changed, transcended his prior self. He's now the 3rd cog between the Soul Society and Yuha, a being not confined to the concept of death due to his true immortality. Unohana, Kenpachi, Stark, and even Ulquiorra to some extent, they all have this kind of narrative where they're so strong that they feel lonely and separated from the world. When Aizen goes to Hueco Mundo, he tries to ascend to heaven, creating a legion of demons or Espada to be replications of the Gote 13, and even creates his own utopia that contains a sun, which is said to be a copy of the one from the world of the living. All of this was done before he even left the Gote 13, and makes Yukio's video game ability kinda look like arse in comparison. Aizen just casually decides, I'm gonna make a sun, because he didn't want it to be nighttime 24/7 while in Hueco Mundo. Interestingly too, it's rather similar to what Yuha does, but Yuha does it in the Soul Palace. The light emitted from this sun also gives him a role of a false god who can see and hear all things, which is very interesting because of how Mr. Kubo always associates Aizen with this concept of God in a lot of the chapter names or symbolism itself. It's kind of everywhere once he becomes transcendent and is even used in the war arc when he returns. If Aizen were to replace or gain the Soul King's power, this would make a lot of sense. Though I will save a lot of this for a future Aizen video where I talk about his later iterations, it's very clear that he was intended to be this kind of fallen angel, fallen Gote 13 member, Lucifer-esque character. For those a little confused about Uetsu Unohana, due to her menacing nature shown in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, this prior Q&A establishes how Aizen would actually perform in the war arc, which I'll get into a little later on. Both Aizen and Yuha, during the preparations for their individual war arcs, never make any form of a plan for the prospect of battling Uetsu Unohana. Shunsui believes once Yamamoto passes, that they should prioritize Kenpachi over Unohana, and Aizen pays zero attention to her when she arrives in Karakura Town. There are some indicators that she is out of her prime, which I don't intend to argue against, but my major point would be, if her prime was that much greater, training Kenpachi wouldn't be so needed. This also backs up previous claims I've made in older videos, that Shunsui and Yamamoto clearly stagnated, though they were still regarded as threats to Hushvolth, Yuha, and the Royal Guard. We know Shunsui isn't stronger than Yamamoto, however, Aizen believes a potential battle to the death with Yamamoto could be a coin toss. If Unohana hypothetically trained during the time skip of the Aizen defeat to the start of the war arc, she objectively couldn't have gotten much stronger because she's either back in her prime or she's just not, which would make things incredibly vague if you were to argue that she did train. The dialogue presented between Unohana and Ichigo in the Garganta would also lead us to believe that if she had to step in and help against Aizen, she wouldn't be able to do much at all, because Kyoko Suigetsu had already affected her. She herself is not only shocked at Ichigo's power at that time, but she believes only Ichigo has a chance to stop Aizen. Just keep in mind that the safety of every realm in Bleach is at stake here, so at some stage she may have to consider intervening, and the expression on her face is pretty clear, yet this Ichigo gets played with by base Aizen. To add further to how the official material of Bleach depicts Aizen and Unohana, even their official stat bubbles show Aizen being superior to her in his Captain Aizen design. If battles in Bleach are battled with spiritual pressure, that would mean she has already mentally conceded to the idea of breaking out of Kyoko Suigetsu with force, and if she was to intervene, as I stated before, she would have likely fought a very similar battle to Yamamoto, where she would need to put herself in situations where she could be beheaded or fatally wounded to hurt Aizen. Aizen manages to survive multiple of these situations with Yamamoto and Ichigo, one of which hits him point blank with a sacrificial Kido, and in Mr. Kubo's words, he believes Aizen's main worry with the prospect of battling Unohana would actually be expending too much energy on her, which could cause him issues when arriving at Sokyoku Hill if he faces other Shinigami before leaving, which, you guessed it, that does actually happen. Some may argue that, well, you need to also consider that Gin is with him. Now, not only would Gin not do that in character, as he's never actually been shown to do it, not even in Karakura Town, but Aizen thinks this kind of reliance on a teammate is a sign of weakness. I also don't believe that Gin would help him, with further evidence, because if he was to see that Unohana gets the upper hand at any stage throughout this encounter, he would just let Aizen die. In fact, he might actually help Unohana, so keep in mind that he is somewhat aware that in the future, Aizen will likely become harder and harder to kill. He is quite privy to a lot of Aizen's future planning, so one of those things would include what he is doing with the Hogyoku. Gin is also aware that he has this secret legion of very strong hollows, so again, it would actually be optimal for him to help Unohana. I guess in a sense too, there's kind of a narrative contradiction for Aizen to consistently yearn for a person to fight him on his level, if there are just multiple beings that can casually be this way all the time, all around him. He would more than likely entertain a battle with Unohana, or at the very least make a plan for her if he did view her as a legitimate threat. He doesn't seem to have any issue with Unohana in particular either. He knew that he could just leave, hence why he did that. It's kind of similar to the Renji encounter where he's like, I don't particularly want to kill you, Renji, but if you keep standing in my way, I will do it. To Unohana's credit, Aizen does compliment her sharpness when figuring out that the body of his recovered was actually a fake. Urahara more than likely also finds the prospect of battling Aizen before fusing with the Hogyoku more tricky, due to how he wields Kyoko Suigetsu and other techniques, thus would tie back into the ego death and change of identity narrative that I mentioned. Aizen seems pretty verbally consistent that his only true worry in combat is actually Yamamoto, and makes contingency plans for a hypothetical awakened Kenpachi, that's if he ever were to appear. This showcases that many things are actually quite known to Aizen. Yamamoto's Bankai, Kenpachi's notorious strength from the past, Ishin's Bankai, which he verbatim sort of talks about, Unohana's status as the Kenpachi, even Yoroichi, as depicted in the current anime adaptation of Bleach, she has knowledge of Senjumaru's Bankai. It's also showcased that there are old Quincy drawings of Bankai Yamamoto too, and a painting on Yamamoto's wall, showing to me that a lot of Aizen's contingency plans around Yamamoto were specifically how he would deal with Bankai Yamamoto, so when he talks about battling Yamamoto to the death, he's keeping that in mind. As a general rule of common sense, he would also expect that anyway, because if he gets the upper hand against Shikai Yamamoto, well, what's the next logical conclusion? He's probably going to go Bankai, and even if he doesn't have knowledge on what it is specifically, one thing that is known is that Yamamoto has the most destructive Zanpakuto of all, so you get what I'm saying. A feat from what we could consider an actual weaker version of Aizen would be, earlier in Turn Back the Pendulum, Aizen is shown casting Keto barriers without even looking and blocks an enraged Keto from Tessai. Now, Tessai is very interesting because he was the former captain of the Keto Corps, and this gives us further insight as to how adept Aizen is at casting Keto, and this is before Aizen even becomes a captain. So again, just more examples of how much stronger he is than a captain. I want to take a second to read you all the most in-depth glaze I've ever witnessed from a character in fiction. A glaze session so wild that it truly encapsulates just how menacing Aizen actually is. Captain Aizen isn't scary because he uses Kyokusui Getsu. Kyokusui Getsu is a terrifying power, but there are lots of guys who'd rather die than obey him if that was all he had. Those crazy as Sparta all had their individual motives, but were brought together by one thing: his strength. Captain Aizen's powers are without equal. Beware of Kyokusui Getsu? No, that's reckless. Beware of everything else? No, that's reckless too. The sky falling, the earth cracking open, you can all put your wits together to prepare for all kinds of calamities, but Captain Aizen's powers are far beyond any precautions. I have witnessed events so tiny and so fast they can hardly be said to have occurred at all. But you, Adrian, you're just a man. The world's smartest man poses no more threat to me than does its smartest termite, Dr. Manhattan. When the topic of Aizen's intelligence is brought up, the usual thing that follows is a comparison to the likes of Madara, Light, Johan, and many other characters known for their intellectual capability or IQ in battle. I made a post about this on X around a month ago and brought up an aspect of the topic that I believe many don't consider when discussing who is the smartest character amongst a random list of them. When discussing intelligence, it's not as simplistic as having two characters punch something and then measuring the joules or how many grenades worth of destruction it caused. Intelligence is a spectrum that isn't mathematically provable. Only certain elements of that said spectrum are. Even IQ tests themselves are seen as unproductive, for the most part, as this overarching way to truly measure intelligence, because it doesn't consider all aptitudes when doing said test. Some people are capable of actually mastering IQ tests or increasing their result number by just simply retaking the test over and over. Is Bill Gates intelligent for his work at Microsoft? Or is the random man in Eastern Europe who can put a car back together with his bare hands more intelligent? Is the person who will save you from dying in the wilderness due to their medical expertise more intelligent? Or the 130 IQ chess master who can't? Humans are not computers with preset programming that defines all capabilities. And instead of thinking about this idea of intelligence, you should think more about what you personally value as intelligent. This will also define your own personal bias when discussing these subjects. In some cases, even the smartest in history have fallen to the smallest of mistakes. Some would consider those educated deeply about a sport to be intelligent, while others prefer the scholar of quantum mechanics. That being said, as I don't want to turn this video into a thesis on the bell curve, I do, however, want to point out that what Aizen did achieve throughout the story, while kinda doing everything with the mindset of actually wanting to lose, is also very impressive when you consider that he was able to fool the entire Soul Society, except for around 5 to 10 individuals, for 100 years or so, without raising further suspicion. Shinigami from Bleach, at least from what we know of the story, can live to be around 3,000 years old. So even from just life experience alone compared to real-world humans, they empirically have far more capability to absorb knowledge over their lifespans. Aizen's an interesting case because I think if anything, he is mentally nerfed and quite destructive in his impulsive behavior. Most of his plans don't even actually work out in the way that he initially wanted them to. Rukia not being executed, getting caught by Unohana, being forced to stab Momo himself, Wonder Why's not defeating Yamamoto, almost actually dying to Yamamoto twice. If you go back and just read his interactions with characters and sort of analyze the plans themselves a little further than just the all a part of my plan, Keikaku, You'll be surprised at how many things don't actually work out for Aizen or in the specific way that he wanted them to. He also delays his plans to force Ichigo into evolving, which in turn leads to his direct defeat. While a chess match between Light and Aizen sounds good in theory, consider that Aizen's brain perceives reality and information so much faster than Light can, that he'd have not only a higher crystallized IQ than Light with his age, especially for pattern recognition and memory, but Aizen could work out 500 considerations before Light makes one single chess piece move in his head. Aizen believes his only intellectual rival to be Kisuke Urahara, and he's a man known for his 1000 plans. Light's getting flustered and almost beaten by above average intelligence police officers, while Aizen is outwitting what we would consider hypergenius beings that have mastered healing, aging, a utopian society for themselves, and technology beyond our comprehension. Relative to Madara's age, Aizen has actually lived around 5 of his lifetimes. In his own words, Aizen's hit his peak, which would cover all faculties like intelligence. He aspires to transcend the very limitations of Hollow and Shinigami, so to hit a higher level of intelligence would also be connected to that. Intelligence in the way I've described, apart from the brain processing speed aspect, is also weird when you think about it like this. Is Aizen more intelligent for defeating the Gotei 13, who have a combined age of close to 5,000 years of experience? Or Madara defeating the Kage, who probably have a combined age more closer to 200? Is Aizen fooling all of the Shinigami into looking at Kyokusei Getsu years ago an intelligence feat, or something capable by even one of you in the comments if you were him? Give Aizen a death note, a brief summary of how modern human society works, with a will to win, and he would likely be unstoppable. I think if anything, we've never even seen Aizen's true intelligence. There's also other facets of intelligence such as emotional intelligence and the ability to psychologically manipulate other people. This is seemingly a skill that would require a significant degree of social intelligence and a great deal of understanding of the psyche. The fact that Aizen can manipulate almost every character he interacts with in some regard shows that he is very competent in that field of intelligence. Aizen chose to reveal his identity while trolling the L of his universe. Something pretty cracked about Aizen's power, if you really think about it, is that Aizen's spiritual pressure is so high that he can just ignore Baragun's ability to slow time, age it, and eradicate anything with it. When Aizen starts to transform, he ends up actually becoming so powerful that with a single glance of his eyesight, he can annihilate the Katotsu. This is a being that governs time, can accelerate you through time so intensely that you die, and apparently doesn't operate in Bleach's normal physics, but instead on a conceptual level, almost as if it has authority over time and space. In the trailer for Bleach, Rebirth of Souls, Aizen has a couple of crazy statements related to his power. Captain of Squad 5, with the crime of high treason, he is the proud owner of having spiritual pressure that surpasses all Soul Reaper, and a general, unparalleled power beyond limitation. Now this statement is pretty wild to say the least. It would be entirely dependent on which form of Aizen it's specifying, but it's interesting that it's worded this way while showing Karakura-town Shikai Aizen. And this game is actually overseen by Mr. Kubo in the same regard that the novels are. Added to Gin's statement and the rhetoric surrounding the cleaner, Aizen also has a later statement about reaching an existence that exceeds natural law. His two encounters with Isshin are very situational also, with Isshin being attacked off guard so Aizen can watch his experiment battle him, and he's then fighting Isshin later in the story while playing Hot Potato with the Hogyoku, which is about to awaken. It's pretty clear that Aizen has the speed advantage and doesn't go all out against Isshin, further showing again how Aizen is pretty comfortably many times stronger than a typical captain. Even when Ichigo uses his mastered holification, which is comparable to a resurrection in transformation, which is comparable to Bankai according to Urahara, he still cannot close the gap with Aizen, especially when Aizen gets serious. According to other statements that Aizen makes, he considers Yamamoto a greater force than the fighting potential of the Gote 13, so this would show us that Aizen is a head captain tier threat, and considering Shunsui becomes the head captain after Yamamoto's death, the proof is in the pudding, so they say. Something rather nasty about Aizen is that, if you pay close attention to his encounter with Shinji in Karakura Town, not only was he never under Shinji's Sakanade, but Aizen makes a very particular comment, one that distinctly references how he was never under his ability the entire time, but in fact, Shinji was still under his Kyoku Suigetsu 100 years later. This would also become more and more obvious when you start to look at how the art in both the anime and manga depicts Aizen having no slash wound after he was supposedly slashed. You could say he may have healed in that time span, but he can't heal clothing. To go even further with this, have you ever paid attention to what Shinji's Bankai actually does? It turns everyone placed under it into foes, which makes it a rather dangerous Bankai to activate. Isane describes that the initial ability of Aizen's supposed Zanpakuto was the exact same ability, using reflections of fog and water to confuse one's enemies so they kill each other. Not only does he mock Shinji verbally, but does so physically twice. Aizen asks Shinji, "How long did you know I was there?" Shinji asks, "How long were you using Kyoku Suigetsu?" Shinji states, "Since Aizen was a baby," which is what Aizen then states to Ichigo. Mr. Kubo made some pretty creative parallels between these two, even giving them similar Shikai techniques. Shikai and Bankai are meant to be reflections of one's true character, and their dynamics with their lieutenants are reflections of one another. Very ironic. An ongoing theme with the way Aizen has always been presented in the story is that he was just always this head captain level threat. I've always kind of mentally placed Captain Aizen around Yamamoto and Fullbring Bankai Ichigo caliber. It's quite clear that Fullbring Bankai Ichigo, though he isn't stronger than Yamamoto, at least with certain argumentation he's not, he should at least linger right below him, especially based on the way Yuha describes that form of Ichigo, and obviously Aizen being the anomaly that he is would fit in that caliber of power, so it's been pretty consistent since he was first established in the story. Ishin's feats, while out of combat for 15 or so years, the Visored still not surpassing him after 100 years of angry training, and Shunsui's explanation of how long it would take for Toshiro to linearly surpass him also would give this credence. Official Bleach side material even states he ranks among the top Gote 13 captains before his true identity is even revealed. This means fake Aizen was already regarded as insanely powerful. He's actually stated to excel at everything, which would include Zanjutsu and Hakuda. Because of the way he usually fights, he gives off more of an elegant, swift combat style, but if he had to have a sword fight with Unohana or Yamamoto, he would do better than you might actually think. Keep this very clearly in mind, the stat bubbles and statements in these guidebooks are talking specifically about fake Aizen. As an example to add to my prior point, Renji might state that he trained to fight or surpass Aizen, but that doesn't mean he actually has. I wouldn't give him a chance to be someone that could swap blades with Captain Aizen until he gets his true Bankai. This is one of those situations where the feats would actually take priority over the statements. There's a very solid argument to be made that Yamamoto stagnated across the time skip, both mentally and physically, and if Aizen has only viewed Yamamoto as his main threat and Urahara as his mental rival, then realistically, Captain Aizen could slaughter a majority of the Sternritter, with the only ones capable of threatening him being the Royal Guard. Because of the aforementioned levels of power that characters like Yamamoto and Urahara were at, I believe Aizen would have still been classed as a war potential by Yuha, even if he never transformed with the Hogyoku. He's far too dangerous, unpredictable, and if Aizen was a good guy, that, let's say, never defected from the Soul Society, he and Gin would have been major obstacles for the Sternritter. Returning to Kyoku Suigetsu for a moment, this is also an incredibly useful tool which not a single character in Bleach, including Soul King Yuha, has ever forcefully broken out of. Even when Ichibei rewrites Yuha's entire being to be that of the power of an ant and removes the value of his name, Kyoku Suigetsu is still present. Kyoku Suigetsu is such a strong mind hacks that it's capable of resisting conceptual manipulation. Ichibei has authority over the value and concept of names and the color black, and even while hitting him with his ink and rewriting his whole being, when Yuha restores his powers, Kyoku Suigetsu is still present. Those Quincy's are f***ed. Consider that while Unohana never attempts to overpower the technique with force or even mentions doing so, Yamamoto never considers the activation of Bankai to do the same either. In fact, keep this in mind, Shunsui was going to use Bankai against Stark, and this isn't reflective on whether or not he truly needed it. He just felt like to kill someone like Stark, he would need Bankai, so it could have been a stomp for all we know. It isn't indicative of the fact that Stark scales to the Bankai itself, but hear me out on this. The very fact that Shunsui doesn't use it against Aizen is very clearly an indicator that not only would it be useless against Kyoko Soigetsu, but it wouldn't be enough to actually deal with Aizen. And when we're talking about the severity of threats here, it's quite clear that Aizen is a bigger threat than Stark. The time skip and misinformation about the Shinigami badge has given people quite a bit of cognitive dissonance in regards to Bleach's power scaling. While it's true many characters did train before the first wave of the Stone Ritter invasion, there's a lot of lieutenants and captains that would objectively still lose to Captain Aizen. The gap between these arcs isn't Frieza to Majin Buu, there's legitimate consistency to prove that many of these Stone Ritter and captains would be spanked by Captain Aizen. Realistically, when you break it down, what does a Stone Ritter like Remy do to someone like Aizen? All Kenpachi had to do was look intimidating enough, and Gremmy accidentally ended his own life by trying to imagine himself the same as Kenpachi. Once he falls victim to Kyoko Seigetsu, he would lose to Aizen's sword slashes or various Kido. Aizen could also, if he was to take a similar approach to the Kenpachi situation, knowing how oblivious Gremmy is, he's pretty much a child in an overpowered person's body, Aizen could simply make himself appear scarier than Kenpachi was, and he would just do the same thing as before. If he were to fight the X-axis, Lelibaro, especially with the intent to kill, he could use Hado 99 to absorb his energy, thus dealing with his intangibility. Gremmy and Lelibaro can spam their attacks all day, but they will never hit Aizen. Once Aizen becomes aware of how they steal Bankai too, he would never use it, and he doesn't in the normal story anyway. Along with that too, depending on the opponent, Aizen could power null the capability of his Bankai being stolen, very similar to what Yuha explains about Yamamoto. But he actually has a very good win condition against someone like Lelibaro, so if he was to summon a full incantation Kurohitsugi around Lelibaro, he would be able to annihilate him with so much gravity that his very being would be molded and stretched out into nothingness. If he's made of light and intangible, well, what happens when light enters a black hole? Exactly what I just said about what he would do to Lelibaro. Shunsui did not surpass Yamamoto over the time skip, and he also lost an eye during the first invasion of the Stone Ritter, so one can argue he's actually weaker than he was in Karakura Town. Captain Aizen is objectively capable of threatening even Royal Guard level Stone Ritter before he even transforms into any of his Hogyoku forms. Hopefully a lot of this helps clear up some of the downplay that people have been spewing about Aizen. His access to Kido makes him disgusting in cross-verse debates, and even within the normal story itself, being able to whip out teleportation Kido, lightspeed seals, sealing in general, time stop, barriers with thousands of defensive layers, existence erasure, healing, lightning, light, fire, binding, absorption, so many different Kidos. In fact, we don't even know all of them, and he can wield around 100. There is potentially around 100 different Harry Potter spells that he can just wield in combat. For a bit of perspective to explain how strong Captain Aizen is, this will give a pretty good mental image. He could flick his wrist in the most casual manner and replicate the feat Ichigo performed where he slashed millions, in fact, some translations say hundreds of millions, of lightspeed razor petals from Byakuya's Bankai. This is also super obvious too, but he could block the Sokyoku, and when he becomes stronger in the story, it's implied the Sokyoku is actually incapable of executing him. Another argument that could be made in regards to Aizen versus Shunsui is that he could potentially, now I wouldn't argue this position 100% because of how Shunsui's Bankai operates, but he could power null it with spiritual pressure. The fact that both Yamamoto and Yuha can't see past Kyoko Soigetsu or forcefully break out of it just shows that he would comfortably kill Shunsui. Even if we say Shunsui's attacks can ignore durability, because he actually used his Bankai against an enemy that was objectively stronger than he was and it still affected him. The reality is that the attacks themselves will just never hit Aizen because he won't be able to locate where he is. The Kyoko Soigetsu just makes it such a hard battle for someone like Shunsui to actually beat him. There's a Q&A from around 15 years ago where someone actually asked Kubo what would happen if Shunsui was to activate Bankai against Aizen, could he defeat him in a sense, and Kubo pretty much sort of pushes it away with like, Shunsui isn't thematically meant to be the guy that sort of fights Aizen. Obviously, based on the way I've described, Kyoko Suigetsu just makes it impossible for Shunsui to win, and they in fact battle in Karakura Town, which is shown, but just like the other Q&A, Mr. Kubo seems to agree that it wouldn't go well for Shunsui. Though Unohana's healing is quite good, in fact the only arguably better healer is Orihime, I think Aizen would try to behead her during Kyoko Suigetsu, and his defense with spiritual pressure would assist him quite a lot. It is also shown in the stat bubbles that his defense is better than hers, and again, I gotta be really clear, this is stats that are given to the fake Aizen, so the stats could actually be higher for the real evil Aizen if he is to fight her seriously, so a fair bit of evidence is present that he would in fact be able to defend himself pretty well against her. If he can tank Yamamoto's sacrificial Hado, he should be safe when fighting seriously. Though the ability is unknown, he could rely on a hypothetical Bankai activation to amplify himself further if needed too, so keep that in mind. If he's hit his peak as a Shinigami, inherently he has gained Bankai in the past at some stage. He may just find his Shikai's ability to be more useful in combat, similarly to how Soifon's Shikai is more versatile than her Bankai. I can't comfortably see a reality where Aizen, of all characters, hasn't achieved Bankai.